Sometimes you just have to act. The staff tosses the old man out of the bank, but a cop steps in and brings him back in to take action. Joseph felt a mix of anger, frustration, and worry. He desperately needed the money, but no one seemed to be paying attention to him. His whole reason for going to the bank was to access his own money. How could they refuse him like that? He was determined to get his hands on that money. The teller couldn't budge on returning his money. The 92-year-old man grew increasingly upset and emotional. His wife relied on him. He couldn't leave without the money. The man persisted despite the teller's attempt to explain they couldn't release funds due to his expired ID. While they recognized him and knew his ID had only expired a week ago, policy bound their hands. Bank rules required valid identification for transactions at the teller. Though they offered to assist him at the ATM, he refused. Joseph didn't trust the machines at all. Plus, he didn't even have a bank card, and they couldn't give him one without identification. That just wouldn't work. If they didn't let him take money out from the teller, he wouldn't have any money for anything. He was getting distraught and scared. The old man even had tears in his eyes. But when one of the bank managers came over and touched his shoulder, the man got angry and started yelling at him, even swinging at him. His stress levels were through the roof, and the older man was completely losing control. He kept yelling that they couldn't hold his money. He needed it. He screamed and shouted that they couldn't keep his money. Things were getting terrible. The security guard grabbed the old man's shoulders and escorted him out of the bank, instructing him to return with proper identification. They couldn't grasp how desperate he felt. To them, it seemed like an overreaction from an elderly person. They didn't realize he had valid reasons to feel scared and worried. He returned banging on the door and demanding entry. That's when the bank decided to call the police. They didn't want trouble for the old man, but they feared he might pose a danger, especially for himself. His anger was reaching a dangerous level. As Caleb's shift neared its end, he received a call about an elderly person in distress near the bank. Despite his fatigue from working all night, Caleb decided to respond. Being the closest officer, he felt compelled to handle the situation carefully. He hoped the elderly person would perceive his intentions positively. Caleb hurried to the bank, and when he got there, he saw something worrying. An old man was banging on the locked doors, his face red and tears running down his cheeks. His pleas to be let inside tugged at Caleb's heartstrings. He realized he needed to approach the situation delicately to prevent the man from further distress. Caleb feared the man might suffer a stroke if his agitation escalated. He resolved to uncover the root of the problem and provide the necessary assistance. When he saw the officer coming, the old man turned and started yelling at the bank. He said they were trying to take his money that he had worked hard for. Caleb realized he needed to hear the entire account from the old man, but first he had to remove him from the volatile environment of the bank. Intending to de-escalate the situation, Caleb inquired about Joseph's name and extended an invitation to accompanying him for a cup of coffee at a nearby cafe across the street. Caleb was taken aback when the old man revealed his dire situation. With no other means to pay for necessities, the old man's funds had run dry, and he lacked a bank card. The thought of being unable to buy food for himself and his wife weighed heavily on him. But the situation was even graver than Caleb initially realized. It wasn't just about the old man's needs, but about his beloved wife's well-being. She was gravely ill, requiring medication that they couldn't afford without withdrawing money from the bank. Caleb understood the urgency and importance of the situation. Joseph was really mad at himself. Even though he was 94, he was still sharp, and he usually handled things really well. He maintained a surplus of cash and even stocked extra medication. However, over the past fortnight, illness had also beset him, throwing everything into disarray. Stuck at home, the couple depended on a nurse who came once a week to help them, but they didn't have anyone to help with chores around the house. Their marriage had been childless, and distance separated them from most of their nieces and nephews, who were engrossed in their lives. With his wife incapacitated with illness, the weight of responsibility fell solely on Caleb's shoulders. He diligently made trips to the bank for funds, meticulously completed grocery shopping, and ensured his wife's medication was replenished without fail. However, the recent weeks had seen him succumb to a severe bout of flu, rendering him unable to venture out for these essential tasks. They only had enough medicine left for one morning, so they really needed to get money fast. And if they didn't, his wife wouldn't get her important medicine, which would be really bad. Stricken with illness himself, Caleb faced the harrowing reality of their situation. No other means to acquire the necessary provisions, a situation that could prove fatal. Moreover, the pressing need for sustenance added to his mounting worries. The aftermath of his severe flu left the elderly man drained of energy, yet he summoned every ounce of willpower to rise and attend to his obligations. Determined, he ventured out, mustering his strength to reach the bank, only to be met with a disheartening revelation. His identity card had expired a mere week prior. Amidst the chaos of recent events, he hadn't even realized. Baffled by the bank's refusal to accommodate him, he couldn't comprehend the lack of compassion. It seemed inconsequential to him. A mere week's difference in appearance shouldn't invalidate his identity. However, bureaucratic protocol remained unforgiving. Lacking a valid driver's license to serve as an alternative, he relied on public transportation due to declining eyesight, his license having lapsed over a year ago. The bureaucratic hurdles added another layer of complexity to his already burdensome circumstances. Joseph had gone through a lot of really tough stuff in the past year, and now he felt like he was almost falling into despair because of it. Each passing day witnessed his wife's health deteriorating, a sight that pierced his heart as he assumed the role of her devoted caretaker. Struggling with this complicated problem, he felt like a heavy weight of failure was pressing down on him, making him sad. He tried to hide his tears, but keeping up his brave face was rigid. It felt like everything was going wrong. He felt like he couldn't take it anymore. But even though he was really sad, he still had a little bit of hope left. He thought maybe someone would help him and make things better. With 2 days officially off duty, Caleb had committed himself to aiding his newfound friend with unwavering dedication. Together, they embarked on a journey to the licensing department. They shared resolve propelling them forward. Typically, renewing an identification card requires scheduling an appointment, but being in uniform carries certain privileges. Caleb seized the opportunity to engage with a supervisor, laying bare their predicament. Realizing that a 94-year-old man stood on the precipice of financial insecurity without his card tugged at their heartstrings. Moved by compassion, they agreed to accommodate the old man, albeit with a caveat. Joseph wouldn't receive his new identification card on the spot. The bureaucratic process dictated a wait of 4 to 6 weeks for delivery by mail. Nevertheless, they offered a temporary ID as a stopgap measure. Caleb couldn't help but worry about its efficacy at the bank. The institution's unbending adherence to policy left little room for leniency. They remained steadfast, even at the risk of leaving a loyal client in dire straits. With their new ID cards in hand, they started going back to the bank. Caleb was really nervous and worried the whole time. The dwindling daylight signaled the impending closure of the banks, adding a sense of urgency to their already tight timeline. Caleb grappled with a mounting dread, fearing their painstaking efforts would falter just as victory loomed. The old man still felt really embarrassed about getting kicked out of the bank. Now, with a police officer with him, he went back to face the problem directly. Hastening their steps, they reached the bank's entrance just as the staff prepared to lock up for the day. A moment of reckoning awaited. Refusing to concede defeat, Caleb surged forward, determined to make his plea heard. Desperate, he implored the staff to halt their actions, seizing the opportunity to recount the events that led to their ignominious expulsion. Then, the old man found his voice with a humility born of remorse. He said sorry to the teller and everyone there, and really meaning it. Even if they hadn't forgiven him, he still wanted to apologize. He hoped they would see how sorry he was. After much deliberation, the bank manager relented, albeit with a slight deviation from protocol. With only 5 precious minutes remaining until closing time, ordinarily dedicated to finalizing end-of-day procedures, they instead redirected their efforts to assist the elderly gentleman in need. They quickly gave him his money and even gave him a bank card just in case something bad happened in the future. The old man accepted it, even though he didn't really want to. He was thankful for the help and left the bank feeling safer, holding onto his new things tightly. Caleb's steadfast support had not gone unnoticed by the old man, who expressed heartfelt gratitude for his unwavering assistance. With each step away from the bank, Joseph conveyed his appreciation, acknowledging the cop's enduring kindness amidst the hustle and bustle of his demanding profession. Even though it was really late and Caleb had a tiring day, his kindness made a big impact on the old man. It gave him hope in a tough world. Caleb chuckled softly, his resolve unwavering. The thought of leaving the old man in his need never crossed his mind. Having lost his grandfather just the year before, Caleb found solace in the company of someone who evoked memories of his beloved relative. With no pressing obligations demanding his attention, Caleb embraced the opportunity to extend his assistance further, recognizing the inherent goodness in dedicating his time to helping others. Caleb accompanied the old man on a series of errands, starting with a trip to the pharmacy to collect his much-needed medication, followed by a visit to the grocery store to stock up on essential provisions. Sensing the fatigue weighing heavily on Joseph, Caleb suggested a detour for a takeout on their way back home, recognizing the convenience of a ready-made meal after a long day. Upon their return home, Joseph was greeted with a surprise. Caleb's timely assistance ensured they arrived just as the nurse prepared to depart, alleviating his wife's growing concern. Though initially startled by her husband's arrival accompanied by a police officer, she quickly warmed to the young man whose generosity had profoundly impacted their day. It wasn't until later that evening that the full extent of Caleb's assistance became apparent to them. With Caleb having departed to rest after his long day of service, the couple savored their time together, grateful for the unexpected kindness they had received. Feeling nervous, Joseph got the envelope with his remaining money. He wanted to see how much money he had left for the rest of the month. However, his expectations were overturned when he discovered the envelope unexpectedly intact. Joseph saw that Caleb was good at handling the transaction, so he gave the envelope to Caleb because he knew Caleb could count the money faster. As the day progressed, Joseph felt the weight of exhaustion bearing down on him, grateful for the relief of relinquishing control to someone else. But Joseph was really surprised by what he would tell his wife that night. He showed her the envelope full of money that Caleb gave him. Joseph couldn't believe it. Caleb didn't just pay for their expenses. He did it all by himself, which was more than Joseph ever expected. But the story didn't end there. Over the following years until their passing, Caleb continued to visit the couple regularly. He assisted with groceries and attended to tasks that Joseph couldn't manage. What had once been a regret for Joseph transformed into a profound blessing. Caleb found himself reconnected with the warmth of having grandparents, and the elderly couple no longer felt isolated. It served as a poignant reminder that simple acts of kindness can have a profound impact, altering the course of lives in unexpected ways. The power of kindness to transform lives is genuinely remarkable, right? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you hold judgment against individuals who express intense anger in public? And thank you for watching, and be sure to join us again for more captivating videos.